The room felt quiet, but not peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that made every thought sound louder. The man sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the floor, feeling the weight of another sleepless night. Outside, the city had slowed down, but inside his mind, nothing ever stopped. Thoughts moved in circles, worries repeated themselves, and even the smallest memories felt heavy. For years, life had moved too fast. Work demanded long hours. Messages never stopped coming. Expectations followed him everywhere, even into his home. During the day, he managed to function, but at night, everything caught up with him. His body felt tired, but his mind refused to rest. He would lie down, close his eyes, and wait for sleep that rarely came. He tried many things. Warm drinks before bed, turning off lights early, putting his phone away. Some nights he even counted his breathing, hoping it would slow his thoughts. Nothing worked for long. The silence of the night made his worries louder, not softer. Every unfinished task, every mistake, every fear about the future showed up without warning. The days began to feel the same. Wake up tired. Push through work. Come home drained. Repeat slowly, he noticed changes in himself. He became less patient. Small things bothered him more than they should. He stopped enjoying moments that once made him smile. Even conversations felt heavy, as if words took effort to carry. Doctors said his body was healthy, but his mind was exhausted. They advised rest, less stress, more balance. The advice sounded simple, but balance felt impossible. How do you rest when your thoughts refuse to slow down? How do you relax when your chest feels tight for no clear reason? One evening after another long day, he came home later than usual. The building hallway was quiet, the lights dim. As he walked past one of the apartments, something unexpected reached his ears. A soft sound floated through the air, barely noticeable at first. It wasn't loud or sharp. It didn't demand attention. It simply existed. He slowed his steps. The sound was music, but not the kind he usually heard. No strong beats. No sudden changes. Just a gentle flow, like water moving without effort. Each note seemed to follow the next naturally, without rush. He stood there for a moment, unsure why he had stopped. His mind, usually racing, felt slightly less crowded. The tight feeling in his chest eased, just a little. It surprised him. He hadn't done anything special. He hadn't tried to relax. He was just listening. After a few seconds, he continued walking, but the sound stayed with him. Even after he entered his apartment and closed the door, the feeling remained. It wasn't happiness or excitement. It was something quieter. A small sense of space inside his mind. That night, sleep still didn't come easily, but something was different. His thoughts felt slower. The worries didn't disappear, but they felt less sharp. When morning arrived, he noticed he didn't feel as heavy as usual. Over the next few days, the memory of that music returned often. He couldn't remember the exact melody, but he remembered how it made him feel. Calm, without effort. Curious, he searched for similar sounds. He didn't know much about classical music. It had always seemed distant, something for another time or another kind of person. Late one evening, sat alone in his living room and pressed play on a simple recording he found. The music began quietly. Strings moved gently. A piano followed, soft and steady. He leaned back, unsure what to expect. At first his thoughts tried to interrupt, as they always did. But the music didn't fight them. It flowed around them. Slowly, without force, the noise inside his head began to soften. His breathing changed. It became deeper, slower, more natural. Minutes passed without him checking the time. His shoulders relaxed without him noticing. The music didn't tell him to calm down. It didn't ask him to focus. It simply gave him space. For the first time in a long while, he felt present. Not thinking about the past. Not worrying about the future. Just sitting, listening, and breathing. When the music ended, the room felt different. The silence no longer felt heavy. It felt open. He realized he had been holding tension in his body for years without knowing it. That night, sleep came a little easier. Not perfect, not deep, but better. And for him, better felt like hope. He didn't know it yet. But that quiet moment with music was the beginning of something important. A small step toward healing. Not loud, not dramatic, just gentle, steady, and real. As he turned off the light and closed his eyes, the melodies stayed with him, moving softly through his thoughts, reminding him that rest was still possible, even in a restless world. In the days that followed, he found himself drawn to the soft, flowing music again and again. It became a quiet ritual in his life, something he did without thinking, simply because it felt right. He would come home after work, drop his bag, and press play on the recordings he had started collecting. At first, it was just a moment of curiosity, but slowly, it became something more. He discovered that different pieces made him feel different ways. Mozart's music had a lightness to it that lifted some of the heaviness in his chest. Each note seemed to float freely, creating spaces inside his mind where thoughts didn't press against each other. Beethoven's compositions felt deeper. They carried weight, but not the same kind of stress he usually felt. Listening to them, he could feel emotions he hadn't realized were there, quietly asking to be noticed and understood. Chopin's melodies touched a part of him that he had long ignored. Gentle, flowing piano pieces seemed to reach places inside him that had been closed off for years at first. He didn't understand why this music affected him so much. He had never been particularly musical, never learned an instrument, and rarely paid attention to classical music before. But now, sitting in the quiet of his apartment, the sound filled the empty spaces inside him. It was almost as if the music was reaching into the corners of his mind. Slowly opening doors that had been shut for a long time, he began to notice small changes in himself. One evening, after listening to a long piece by Beethoven, he felt the tightness in his chest ease. He could breathe more fully, in his shoulders, which had carried tension for years, relaxed. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of calm without needing to fight for it. The music didn't demand that he relax. It simply existed, and in its presence, he found peace. Sleep started to come more easily, too. He didn't need to count breaths or repeat mantras in his head. When he lay down at night, he would play a recording, and soon his body would follow the rhythm of the music, slowing and letting go. Even if he didn't fall asleep immediately, his mind felt lighter, less crowded with endless worries. He began to wake up feeling more refreshed. With a clarity he hadn't experienced in years, one afternoon he decided to spend a longer time with the music. He turned off his phone, dimmed the lights, and sat in his favorite chair, letting the melodies fill the room. As he listened, he began to notice details he had missed before, the way the strings rose and fell, how the piano notes lingered just a little longer, the soft pauses between phrases. It was as if he was hearing the music for the first time, not just hearing it, but feeling it in his body and mind. He realized that listening wasn't just about sound. It was about attention, about allowing himself to be fully present with the music. The music became a mirror, reflecting his own emotions back to him. Sometimes it revealed sadness he hadn't acknowledged, other times joy he had forgotten. He cried quietly at times, but the tears didn't feel heavy. They felt like release, like letting go of something he didn't need to carry anymore. Slowly, he started to understand that this music was teaching him something about himself. He had spent so long running, pushing, worrying, that he had forgotten what it felt like to simply exist without judgment. Each piece he listened to reminded him that he could sit quietly, breathe, and allow emotions to flow without trying to control them. In a world that never slowed down, the music gave him permission to do just that. He noticed changes in how he approached his day, too. Tasks that once felt overwhelming seemed more manageable. He could take small pauses between decisions, listen to his own thoughts, and respond more calmly. Conversations with others became easier. He found himself less reactive, more patient. Even when stressful situations appeared, he felt a steady presence inside him that he hadn't known before. It wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was gentle, growing quietly, like a seed taking root. Friends began to notice subtle differences. He spoke in a calmer tone. His gestures were slower, more deliberate. He laughed more easily, without feeling forced. They didn't always know what had changed, but they could feel it. and he realized that he didn't need to explain it. The music had done its work quietly, without anyone needing to understand. He also started exploring different composers more intentionally. He spent afternoons reading about their lives, understanding the context in which pieces were written. Knowing that Beethoven had endured hardships, that Chopin had expressed personal emotions in his compositions, gave the music deeper meaning. Each note felt more alive, more connected to human experience. He realized that listening to music was not just entertainment. It was a form of connection, a bridge to understanding emotions that sometimes words could not express. Sometimes he would close his eyes completely and just let the music wash over him. He would imagine walking through a quiet forest, feeling sunlight on his skin, or sitting by a calm lake, watching water ripple. The melodies became landscapes in his mind, spaces where he could rest safely. The stress and rush of daily life faded into the background, replaced by a sense of presence and awareness he had almost forgotten existed. With each passing day, the music became more than sound. It became a companion, a friend that offered comfort without asking anything in return. It reminded him that healing doesn't always come in sudden bursts or dramatic moments. Sometimes it arrives quietly, one note at a time, till the heart and mind begin to remember how to rest. He began to notice that he was not only calmer, but more aware of beauty around him. A simple cup of tea, the soft light through a window, the smell of rain, all of these moments felt more vivid. He realized that music had opened his senses, allowing him to experience life with a gentleness he had not known before. He appreciated details he once overlooked, finding joy in small, ordinary moments. Eventually, he started thinking about how he could share this experience. Not in a formal way, not as a teacher or expert, but simply as someone who had felt the difference music could make. He thought about friends who were also stressed, colleagues who seemed constantly hurried. Perhaps they, too, could find calm in a melody. He didn't have a plan yet, but the thought filled him with a quiet excitement. For now, he returned to his daily routine, but with a new rhythm. Mornings began with a short listening session, a few pieces to set the tone for the day. Evenings ended the same way, winding down, letting the music guide him toward rest. Over time, the anxiety that had once felt permanent became a memory, a reminder of what life had been like before he had discovered this quiet sanctuary. The transformation was not sudden, not dramatic. He still faced challenges, stressful workdays, and occasional sleepless nights, but he had discovered a way to navigate them differently. The music taught him patience, awareness, and the power of gentle presence. Each melody became a step toward a mind that could finally rest, a heart that could feel deeply without being overwhelmed. He began to understand that classical music was more than notes on a page. It was a language of emotions, a guide for understanding himself and the world around him. It didn't force him to confront pain or run from stress. It simply offered a space where he could be fully himself, without pretense, without pressure, just listening and existing. In this new routine, life felt lighter. He still faced challenges, but they no longer defined him. The music reminded him that even in the midst of chaos, calm could be found. And in that calm, he discovered the possibility of healing, of growth, and of reconnecting with a part of himself he had almost forgotten. The melodies became his companions, guiding him gently, shaping a life that was quieter, softer, and full of presence. He realized that this was not just a hobby or a passing interest. It was a lifeline, a bridge to peace, and a source of deep, restorative joy. By now, the music had become more than a routine. It was no longer just something he listened to at night or when he needed to relax. It had begun to shape the way he experienced his life. He noticed that during the day, even when the world pressed in with its usual demands, he could carry a sense of calm with him. The melodies he had absorbed seemed to linger in the spaces between tasks, in the pauses between conversations, in the quiet moments when no one was watching. One afternoon, he found himself with an unexpected block of free time. Instead of filling it with errands or work, he decided to simply sit and listen. He chose a long piece by Chopin, one that he had played many times before, but today he wanted to experience it differently. He closed his eyes, leaned back in his chair, and let the music wash over him without expectation. Each note, each pause, each rise and fall felt like it had its own life. And he became aware of the subtle movements in his own body, the gentle rise and fall of his chest, the way his shoulders softened. The stillness of his hands resting in his lap. As he listened, memories surfaced. Not the loud, intrusive ones that often caused worry or regret, but soft, almost forgotten moments. A walk through a quiet park from years ago, the sound of rain against a window, a conversation that had ended with laughter. These memories did not hurt. They were accompanied by a strange, comforting warmth, as if the music was guiding him gently through them. He realized that for the first time in a long time, he could feel without fear. The emotions didn't overwhelm him. They simply existed. He could notice them without judgment. This realization led him to spend more time with the music each day. He experimented with different ways of listening. Sometimes he would lie down, letting the sound fill the room and move through him. Other times, he would sit quietly with a notebook, writing down thoughts, impressions, or emotions that arose. He discovered that the music not only calmed him, but it also encouraged reflection. He began to understand himself in ways that had previously felt inaccessible. The emotional release became a daily rhythm. He would feel a heaviness in his chest, a tension in his mind, and instead of resisting it, he would turn to music. The melodies became a guide, leading him through the emotional landscape of his own life. Tears came sometimes, but they felt like cleansing, not pain. Laughter came unexpectedly at times, quiet and genuine. Slowly he felt lighter, more capable of facing each day without the constant sense of burden that had followed him for so long. He started to notice the impact on his relationships as well. Conversations with friends and family became more meaningful. He listened more attentively, spoke more calmly, and responded with a patience he hadn't known he possessed. Others noticed the change too. They commented on how peaceful he seemed, how his presence had become gentler. He didn't say much, but inside, he understood that this transformation had been quiet, slow, and deeply personal. The music had shaped him in ways words could not fully capture. Work, which had once been a source of constant stress, began to feel more manageable. He approached tasks with a new mindset, taking moments to pause and breathe instead of rushing. Deadlines were still deadlines, but the anxiety that usually accompanied them was lessened. He found that small breaks spent listening to a short piece of music could reset his focus and bring clarity. Decisions became easier not because the problems changed, but because his mind was no longer tangled in worry and tension. He also became more attuned to the world around him. Simple experiences walking down a quiet street, observing the light through a window, listening to birds outside felt richer and more vivid. The music had awakened a sensitivity to subtle beauty, a recognition of the ordinary moments that carry quiet joy. It was as though the world had not changed, but his perception had, and he felt more connected to it than he had in years. One evening, he decided to explore more about the lives of the composers whose music had become so important to him. He read about Mozart's playful genius, Beethoven's struggles and triumphs, and Chopin's delicate emotional depth. Understanding the human experiences behind the music added another layer of meaning. He realized that these compositions were not just technical arrangements of notes. They were expressions of the human heart, capturing joy, sorrow, struggle, and hope in ways words often could not. Listening to them felt like communicating directly with emotions across time. This awareness also encouraged him to slow down in other areas of life. Meals were eaten more mindfully, conversations were savored, walks were taken with attention to surroundings. Life, which had once felt like a constant race, began to feel more like a journey with quiet pauses, moments to breathe and notice. The music had taught him that presence mattered more than speed, that experiencing life fully required attention, not just movement. He noticed changes in his sleep as well. Nights, which had previously been long battles with restless thoughts, became more restorative. He would play a recording, lie back, and let the melodies guide him into rest. Even if he woke in the night, the music's presence in his mind allowed him to return to sleep more easily. Dreams felt calmer, more vivid, and sometimes insightful. He woke with a sense of balance that had been missing for years. The emotional healing continued subtly, shaping not just his inner world but his daily interactions. He found that patience became natural rather than forced. Anger, frustration, and irritability lost their grip on him. When difficult situations arose, he could respond with a thoughtful calm, carrying a steady presence rather than reacting impulsively. The music had created a new rhythm inside him, one that echoed in every thought, action, and emotion. He also began to experiment with combining music with other forms of relaxation. Gentle stretching while listening, short walks with soft classical melodies in the background. Quiet moments with a cup of tea all became part of a holistic approach to calm. He realized that healing was not about a single act, but about creating an environment and habits that nurtured well-being. Music became the thread that connected these moments, giving them cohesion and depth. Gradually, he began to feel a growing confidence in his emotional resilience. Stress no longer overwhelmed him. Sadness no longer lingered in oppressive ways, and happiness felt more accessible and genuine. The music had guided him through layers of emotion that he had long ignored, helping him recognize, accept, and release feelings without resistance. It was a quiet, patient kind of progress, but it was real, and it was deeply sustaining. He even found that his creative thinking improved. Ideas came more freely, solutions to problems appeared with less effort, and he felt a stronger connection to intuition. The calming effect of music opened mental space, allowing thoughts to move without the usual clutter and interference. He realized that relaxation was not a pause from life, but a way to engage with it more fully, more clearly, and with greater emotional intelligence. Friends and family began to notice not just his calmness, but a deeper sense of authenticity. He was more present in conversations, more attuned to their emotions, and more genuine in his responses. The music had not only healed his inner world, but had allowed him to connect with others on a more meaningful level. The transformation was subtle, invisible to the casual observer, but it had a profound effect on the quality of his interactions and relationships. He continued to explore new pieces and composers, each discovery opening a new doorway inside him. Some pieces brought joy, some melancholy, and some a quiet contemplation that was difficult to describe. Yet all of them contributed to the ongoing process of emotional growth and balance. He realized that listening to classical music was not just a pastime. It was a journey into understanding himself, learning to navigate his inner world, finding peace in a world that often felt chaotic. Over time, he began to anticipate these listening sessions with gentle excitement. They were not obligations or tasks, but invitations to rest, reflect, and heal. Each session left him a little lighter, a little calmer, and a little more connected to himself. The music had become a companion in the truest sense, offering support, guidance, and comfort without asking for anything in return. He realized that healing was not instantaneous. It was a quiet, patient unfolding, a layering of small moments that, over time, created a profound shift. Classical music had become the catalyst for this transformation, providing a space where emotions could be felt, processed, and released. In this space, he was learning not just to survive, but to live fully, with awareness, sensitivity, and a gentle appreciation for the richness of experience. By the end of each day, he felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense that progress was being made, even in small, almost imperceptible ways. He understood that the process was ongoing, that life would always present challenges, but he was no longer defined by them. The music had provided him with tools to navigate emotional landscapes with care and presence. It had taught him that true healing comes not from rushing or forcing, but from allowing, listening, and moving gently through each moment. As the weeks passed, the music had become more than just a part of his daily life. It had started to shape the way he approached everything he did. He no longer rushed through meals or conversations. Each task, even the smallest ones, received his attention in a way that felt deliberate and calm. Mornings began with soft melodies, guiding him into the day, and evenings ended the same way, with music allowing him to release any tension that had built up. He noticed that his presence in the world had changed. In interactions with others, he felt a quiet steadiness. Conversations no longer carried the same urgency or impatience. He listened more deeply, responding thoughtfully rather than reacting impulsively. People began to notice the difference, though they did not know exactly what had changed. Some commented on his calm energy, others on how genuine he seemed in ways they hadn't seen before. The music had also influenced the way he spent time alone. He began to enjoy quiet moments without feeling restless. Even simple activities like making tea, washing dishes, or walking through his neighborhood became opportunities for mindfulness. The music became a background companion, allowing him to notice details that had previously gone unnoticed, the way sunlight filtered through leaves, the subtle scent of flowers in the air, the gentle rhythm of footsteps on the pavement. Each moment, accompanied by music, felt richer and more meaningful at work. He found himself approaching challenges differently. Tasks that once felt overwhelming became manageable. He allowed himself to pause, consider options, and act with intention rather than anxiety. Meetings that used to leave him drained now felt easier to navigate. The clarity and calm cultivated through music translated into sharper focus, better problem solving, and a sense of control over situations that had previously felt chaotic. He realized that the benefits of music extended far beyond relaxation. They were reshaping his capacity to handle life itself. Sleep became more restorative. Even on nights when his mind wandered, the familiar melodies helped guide him back to calmness. Dreams felt lighter, less fragmented, and mornings brought a sense of balance. The exhaustion that had once defined his life faded gradually. He began to feel energetic in ways he had long forgotten, able to approach each day with curiosity and intention rather than dread. He started to explore new composers and compositions, broadening his musical experience. Each new piece seemed to reveal a different layer of emotion, from quiet introspection to gentle joy, from reflective melancholy to soft exhilaration. Listening became an exploration, a journey that encouraged patience and attention. He realized that each composition was a window into the human experience, offering insights into resilience, hope, and vulnerability. With the emotional shifts came a sense of creativity. He began noticing patterns and connections he had missed before. Ideas flowed more easily, and he felt confident exploring new approaches to both work and personal projects. Music had opened mental space, allowing thoughts to emerge without interference from constant worry. The clarity that came with this process felt liberating, like untangling knots that had been tightly wound for years. Relationships also deepened. He became more present with friends and family, noticing their emotions, responding with empathy, and sharing himself more openly. The calm he carried created an atmosphere where others felt safe and heard. Became richer, laughter more spontaneous, and moments together more meaningful. The music had quietly shaped his capacity to connect with others, fostering a sense of shared humanity. He experimented with pairing music with other forms of relaxation. Gentle stretches, mindful breathing, short walks, or simply sitting in a quiet room became more powerful when accompanied by the compositions he had grown to love. He noticed that even brief moments of listening could reset his energy and perspective, helping him return to daily life with a sense of balance and focus. The music had become both a guide and a companion, showing him how to navigate the ebb and flow of each day. One day, he reflected on the journey so far. He remembered the nights of restless thought, the heaviness in his chest, the endless fatigue. It seemed almost unimaginable that he had once felt trapped by his own mind. Yet now he could see that the change had been gradual, gentle, and steady. Each listening session, each mindful pause, each reflective moment had built on the last. The music had provided continuity, a steady thread connecting one day to the next. He noticed that he could now face challenges without being overwhelmed. Stressful situations arose as they always would, but he carried an inner steadiness that allowed him to respond thoughtfully. Fear, anxiety, and frustration no longer had the power to dominate his experience. He could observe these emotions, acknowledge them, and let them pass without judgment. The music had cultivated a resilience that extended far beyond relaxation. It had become a tool for emotional balance. He began to share his experience quietly with others, not in a formal way, but through gentle recommendations, sharing pieces. He found particularly calming, or simply modeling a way of being that reflected the peace he had discovered. Friends responded with curiosity, interest, and sometimes surprise. They noticed the difference in his energy and demeanor, and some began to explore the music themselves. He realized that what had started as a personal journey could ripple outward, touching others in subtle, meaningful ways. The awareness of the composers' lives added depth to the experience. Learning about their struggles, triumphs, and personal stories created empathy and understanding. Each note seemed infused with human experience, carrying lessons about resilience, patience, and hope. He found that connecting to these stories allowed him to connect more deeply to his own life, recognizing patterns, strengths, and areas of growth. He also noticed a shift in his perception of time. Days felt longer, more present, and more fully experienced. He no longer felt rushed or constantly chasing the next task. Moments of quiet reflection, accompanied by music, created a sense of spaciousness. Life felt less like a race and more like a journey to be experienced with awareness, attention, and care. Gradually, he realized that the music had shaped not just how he rested, but how he lived. Each melody carried lessons about patience, presence, and the beauty of subtlety. The emotional depth he experienced in listening allowed him to approach life with sensitivity, empathy, and appreciation. Challenges were no longer obstacles to endure, but opportunities to navigate with awareness and care. He began to integrate music into all aspects of life, not as a separate activity, but as a way of being. Work, leisure, social interaction, personal reflection, all carried the influence of the calm and clarity he had cultivated. The music had transformed from background sound to an active guide, shaping thoughts, actions, and emotions in ways that were subtle yet profound. Even the simplest moments carried significance. A morning cup of tea, the sound of a distant train, the movement of clouds across the sky, each became a point of reflection, enhanced by the awareness the music had brought. He found beauty in ordinary experiences, learning to savor them without needing anything extraordinary to create satisfaction. The music had nurtured a sensitivity to life that extended beyond melody. Shaping his entire perception of the world, he recognized that true healing is not about eliminating challenges, but about learning to navigate them with awareness, patience, and calm. Music had provided the framework for this process. It had opened his mind, softened his heart, and taught him the value of stillness. In the midst of a busy, demanding world, he had found an inner sanctuary, a space of presence and reflection that could be carried into every aspect of life. By now, the music was inseparable from his sense of self. It was not a tool he used occasionally. It was a companion, a guide, a source of insight and restoration. He understood that this journey was ongoing, that life would continue to present challenges. But he was no longer defined by stress, worry, or fatigue. The music had reshaped his inner landscape, cultivating balance, clarity, and emotional resilience. He often sat in quiet reflection, listening to a favorite piece and noticing the way it resonated within him. Each note carried a sense of continuity, a gentle reminder that he could find presence and peace in every moment. The transformation had been gradual, imperceptible at first, but now it was undeniable. The music had healed, guided, and nurtured him, creating a life that was calmer, more attentive, and more fully experienced than he had ever imagined. Over time, he realized that the music had done more than just calm his mind or soothe his emotions. It had transformed his relationship with life itself. What once felt like an endless struggle filled with stress, worry, and exhaustion had slowly become a journey he could navigate with awareness and presence. The quiet melodies of Mozart, Beethoven, and Chopin had opened a door to emotional depth, mindfulness, and genuine peace. And he began to see that this transformation could be shared with others. He decided to introduce music intentionally into his daily interactions. On weekends, he invited friends over and played soft classical pieces in the background, He noticed how the atmosphere shifted. Conversations became slower, more thoughtful. People leaned in, listened more, and seemed calmer. Even small gatherings carried a new depth. The music was not loud or overpowering. It was gentle, almost unnoticed at first, yet it subtly influenced the space. Fostering connection and understanding, work environments also became more manageable. When faced with long meetings or stressful projects, he started keeping short recordings of music that helped him focus. He would listen quietly through headphones, allowing the melodies to guide his thoughts and calm his mind. Tasks that had once seemed daunting became approachable. The music taught him that attention and calmness were not separate from productivity, they enhanced it. His colleagues noticed the change too, often commenting on how composed and centered he seemed even under pressure. He also explored the idea of combining music with simple mindfulness exercises. Short walks with soft classical melodies playing in the background became a practice of observing the world without distraction. He paid attention to the subtle movements of nature, the rustle of leaves, the light changing on buildings, the distant hum of city life. Music allowed him to engage with these details without feeling rushed or overwhelmed. It deepened his awareness, showing him that beauty existed in the quiet moments all around. He began journaling more frequently, writing down reflections inspired by the music. Sometimes he wrote about memories the pieces evoked. Other times, he noted thoughts about his current experiences or emotions he wanted to understand better. The act of writing, paired with music, became a form of emotional processing. It allowed him to capture feelings that were often fleeting, giving them shape and meaning. He realized that music was not just a tool for relaxation, but a medium through which he could explore his inner world. During this time, he noticed the subtle ways his emotional responses had shifted. Frustration and anger no longer felt like unavoidable reactions. He could observe these emotions, acknowledge them, and allow them to pass without holding on. Sadness and melancholy, when they appeared, were gentler, less consuming. Joy became more present, less fleeting. Music had given him the tools to navigate emotions with patience and awareness, turning intense feelings into opportunities for reflection and growth. He also found that his sleep had reached a new level of restorative quality. Nights that were once restless now carried a gentle rhythm. The music accompanied him into rest, guiding his mind into a state of ease. Even when he woke briefly, the melodies lingered, helping him return to calmness without resistance. Morning awakenings became peaceful transitions rather than jolts into the day. The change in his sleep patterns reinforced the overall sense of balance that had gradually emerged in his life. Exploring new compositions became an adventure. He discovered works by lesser-known composers, each with its own emotional language. Some pieces carried deep reflection, others brought playful energy, and some evoked longing or serenity. Each listening session became a voyage, not only through the notes and harmonies, but also through his own inner landscapes. He realized that music was a bridge connecting his mind, heart, and the broader world. Helping him to understand experiences beyond words, friends began seeking his guidance. Curious about how he had transformed so quietly, he shared recommendations, explained how he listened and reflected, and encouraged them to explore music for their own well-being. Some were hesitant, thinking it might be boring or inaccessible. Yet as they listened, they began to experience the subtle shifts he had described. Music, he found, had a universal language that could reach emotions in a way that conversation often could not. He began to understand that the healing power of music was not a quick fix, but a long-term companion. The transformation it had facilitated was cumulative, built one listening session, one reflective moment, one mindful pause at a time. He reflected on how far he had come since those early nights of restlessness and anxiety. Life no longer felt like a relentless race against himself. Instead, he had learned to navigate it with calm, awareness, and an appreciation for the present. The sense of presence he cultivated through music also influenced his creativity. Ideas flowed more freely, and problem-solving became less stressful. He noticed patterns in his thinking that had previously gone unnoticed, connections between experiences and insights that became clear through reflection. Music had not only healed his emotional state, but it also opened pathways for mental clarity and innovation. He understood that relaxation and creativity were intertwined, each supporting the other. He also took joy in the quiet, ordinary moments of life that had once gone unnoticed. A cup of tea in the morning, sunlight falling on the floor, sound of rain against the window wall became sources of reflection and gratitude. The music had trained him to notice the subtleties of existence, to appreciate the present rather than always seeking the next goal or distraction. Life, in all its simplicity, carried depth and meaning when approached with awareness. During weekends, he sometimes visited quiet parks, carrying a small device to play gentle classical music. Walking slowly, observing nature, and listening allowed him to integrate his inner calm with the external world. Birds, trees, and the rhythm of walking seemed to synchronize with the melodies, creating a harmony that extended beyond his mind. The experience was meditative and restorative, reinforcing the idea that healing was not confined to indoor spaces, but could flow into all aspects of life. He began thinking about long-term intentions. Music had shown him the value of patience, reflection, and gentleness. He wanted to maintain these qualities in the years ahead, even as life continued to present challenges. Rather than relying on external validation or constant activity for meaning, he realized that presence and awareness were the foundations of a balanced life. The melodies he had come to love became symbolic reminders of this approach. He also started noticing how others responded in social settings when music was present. Gatherings felt calmer, more attentive, and conversations flowed with a quiet depth. People laughed more easily and shared thoughts with less hesitation. Music, he realized, had a subtle but powerful way of influencing the emotional tone of a space. It could foster empathy, patience, and connection without words. This insight encouraged him to use music thoughtfully, creating environments that supported emotional well-being for himself and those around him. He reflected on the emotional skills he had developed: patience, awareness, and the ability to process emotions without being overwhelmed. These skills were now deeply embedded in his life, influencing his work, relationships, and self-perception. The music had not only healed his mind, but had cultivated wisdom and resilience. He understood that true healing is not about avoiding emotions, but about engaging with them skillfully. Allowing them to guide understanding and growth, he also experimented with combining music with mindfulness and breathing exercises. Gentle stretching while listening, slow walks with awareness of body and environment, and moments of sitting quietly to observe sensations all became integrated practices. The combination amplified the effect of the music, creating a holistic approach to emotional and physical well-being. Each day became an opportunity to practice presence, cultivate calm, and deepen the connection between mind, body, and emotion. As he looked back on the journey, he recognized the profound impact of seemingly small steps. The first night, when he had heard music by chance, had led to months of growth, reflection, and healing. The cumulative effect of daily listening, reflection, and mindful engagement had transformed him. What had begun as a simple attempt to find calm had evolved into a complete shift in how he approached life. In his quiet moments, he often felt gratitude, not just for the music itself, but for the process it had initiated. The transformation was gradual, patient, and deeply human. He understood that the journey was ongoing, so that life would continue to present challenges and stress. But he now had tools, awareness, and inner stability to navigate them. The music had become a lifelong companion, offering comfort, insight, and resilience. He also realized that healing could be shared by introducing friends, family, and colleagues to the music, by modeling calm presence, and by encouraging reflection and awareness. He could extend the benefits he had experienced. The music had the power to touch others in subtle ways, creating ripple effects of calm, empathy, and understanding. He found joy in seeing others experience the gentle, restorative power of melody. Ultimately, he understood that the journey was not about perfection or escape from challenges. It was about learning to navigate life with awareness, patience, and presence. Classical music had provided a vehicle for this transformation, guiding him through emotional landscapes, deepening his perception, and fostering connections with others. Each day, each melody, and each quiet moment became part of a tapestry that shaped a life filled with calm, insight, and meaning in the final reflection. He felt a sense of completeness. He knew that life would continue to offer unpredictability and complexity, but he had found a rhythm that allowed him to move through it with grace. Music had transformed not just his nights or moments of quiet, but his entire approach to living. It had taught him that true relaxation,